Alright everyone, so I wanted to give some updates on the gypsy moth or spongy moth outbreaks that have been reported in Wisconsin, New York, and Virginia. I had made a video on this a couple weeks ago where Scientific American was blaming climate change for their outbreak, and I explained why that was an incredibly lazy explanation when we already have the ecology of the gypsy moths pretty well understood from the past 100 years plus of research on them. The update coming out of Wisconsin is that the population is collapsing. Before, they were blaming the population rise on the chronic drought that they've been suffering, despite the fact that U.S. drought maps have been showing that Wisconsin, although has been a little drier than usual, is not under any sort of significant drought. They've had, a week of rain, or a couple days of rain and a week of high humidity, and the entire population is collapsing, which is exactly what is expected. I talked about this last time. There is a fungus that has been introduced from, I believe it was introduced from Eastern Europe, Entomophora myamiga, that kills this caterpillar when it's in high population densities and when it's humid enough. The populations of these moths in Wisconsin are already exposed to this fungus. The fungus was intentionally introduced there. I want to say it was about 15 years ago. I'm just doing that off memory. It may have been longer. And it's been repeatedly reintroduced both purposefully and in the natural spread of the gypsy moth from the East Coast into the Midwest. It was a little dry because it's the summer in the United States and it's always dry. But once they get a little rain and the humidity in the understory is increased, this fungus begins to infect everything. And by everything, I mean just the gypsy moths. It doesn't really affect any other species in the United States. But once that humidity goes up in the understory from a little rain, all of the caterpillars are sitting ducks, as it were, to infection from this fungus. And this is from Wisconsin Public Radio, that they talked to some foresters, and that they are showing that, or they are seeing that the population is collapsing in many of these areas after severe infestation, which I talked about in the previous video, that these gypsy moths or spongy moths go through a cyclical sort of infestation where the population explodes, and then because of efforts by various agencies and researchers at different universities and things like that, to introduce biological controls with multiple pathogens present, as well as predators and parasitoids, the population eventually succumbs to epizootic, which is the animal version of an epidemic. So Entomophora myamiga is the pathogen, and there's other pathogens. So the other big one is nuclear polyhedrosis virus, which also these caterpillars are exposed to, and it begins to burn out of control in the population once the population gets to a high enough point, and it causes the insects to melt. And they do talk about that virus a little bit in this article. So the population in Wisconsin is collapsing as predicted, as has been normally predicted over the course of the last several decades. We know how this works. The population explodes and then it collapses. But this isn't the only thing that Wisconsin has been doing to control gypsy moth or spongy moth outbreak. The other normal thing, everyone acts like this is some special thing, it's not, is Department of Natural Resources will spray for caterpillars using Bacillus thuringiensis. In this case, it's Bacillus thuringiensis christaki. Bacillus thuringiensis is usually just abbreviated BT. It's a bacteria which produces an insecticidal toxin within its cells. The Christaki variety of this bacteria only affects caterpillars. So what is done is this BT bacteria is grown in enormous quantities. The poison is extracted, or you can just dry out the bacteria, and then you just aerial spray this from airplanes on top of forests. The toxin gets on the leaves. It kills all the caterpillars that eat it. This is a normal preventative measure. It's not just used for caterpillars. There's versions of this that are used for beetles. You may have heard of like BT corn or BT cotton, and it's also used for mosquito control with BT I can't, BTI, the Israeli version of this. I can't remember its name off the top of my head. But anyway, they've been actively spraying for this. It's been having the effect that the desired effect that they were planning on. The population of these moths will be collapsing over the rest of the summer. Hopefully, you'll get a few. Those of you in Wisconsin will get a few more years of peace from these defoliators. But good news all around, basically. Thanks so much.